Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello and welcome to this session of this year's edition of the Doha Forum. My name is Jamal Al-Shayal. I'm a senior correspondent at Al Jazeera Media Network here in Qatar, and I will be moderating this session with some very distinguished guests, experts in their fields, and key voices in this discussion entitled The International Community's Role in Managing Refugee Flows, Syria and Beyond. First, I'm going to introduce the guests very quickly, and then we'll say a couple of words, and each will have a couple of minutes to maybe give an assessment or overview of their view, and then we will hopefully have a bit of an engaging discussion between them all before we open it up to the attendees. So we are from right to right. We have Dr. Savaş Onlu, who's president of the Migration Management at the Ministry of Interior at the Republic of Turkey. So he will be speaking, and then followed by Joanna Vronecka, who is the special coordinator for Lebanon at the United Nations. And then we have His Excellency Benedetto della Vedova. Apologies, I'm bilingual. And yeah, so my linguistic skills really do put me to shame when it's name pronunciation. I'm the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Italy. And we have His Excellency Salim Al-Mislat, who is the President of the National Coalition for Syrian Revolutionary and Opposition Forces. Before I start, and because of the Al Jazeera background or tag that I have to object to something. Obviously, the title in and of itself is an interesting title. We want to be in a situation where we're not discussing managing refugee flow, but actually obviously preventing the creation of refugees. So that is maybe where I'm going to start this setting here. We're talking about managing refugee flows. We're talking about refugees obviously is nothing new. There have been people fleeing their homes and their lands for centuries. What is new is the sheer magnitude, the size, the way in which they are fleeing for their lives. What's also new is that we have come to realize that some of the laws that have been implemented, or at least announced, enacted, aren't being implemented to protect the free and safe movement of people. And what's been more apparent in recent times is that if it wasn't already difficult being a refugee in terms of rights and integration, there are now very clear different classes of refugees, depending on which conflict you're fleeing and what the color of your skin is and maybe what religion you follow. So that's the current situation. I would like everyone to take a couple of minutes maybe to give us their assessment of it and what are the most pressing things, and then we'll start the discussion. Doctor, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by adding a few more points to provide a framework, a solid framework to the discussion. I mean, as you know, as all of us know very well, the source countries of refugees are mostly either underdeveloped or developing countries. I mean, conflict zones, civil strifes, wars. Only the Ukrainian war and the refugees, the recent influx of Ukrainian refugees to Europe is an exceptional, constitutes an exceptional situation. But when we look at the main picture and the refugee hosting countries in the world, as you know, Turkey, 3.7 million Syrians under temporary protection, plus more than 300,000 other nationals as conditional refugees or asylum seekers. Uganda, Pakistan, Bangladesh, more than 1 million Rohingya Muslims, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Jordan, Kenya, Lebanon, Peru, Sudan. None of these countries are richest countries in the world. Most of them are either underdeveloped and, as I said, or developing countries. Yet, so far, they continue to host the largest refugee population in the world. So what is the solution? I mean, as you said, the refugee issue and the migration issue is as old as human history itself. Yet it continues to pose a big challenge to all of us because our efforts, the humanity's efforts so far, to make the world a better place for all of us, to eradicate the root causes of refugees and migrants, didn't work. So what we need to do is initially is to address the root causes, to increase the international joint efforts to eliminate the conflicts, to eliminate the root causes of the issue, stabilization, etc. But when we look at the reality in the field, how the world are responding to the issue, is first to externalize the refugee flow, to make sure that refugees will continue to stay in the neighboring countries of the conflict zone. And these countries are also not developed countries. When we look at the refugee hosting countries, likewise, the refugee origin countries themselves, the refugee hosting countries are also developing countries or underdeveloped countries. Because the neighboring countries, refugee zone, with the exception of Ukraine, this is the condition. So to make sure that refugees will continue to stay in these countries, to develop preventive policies so as to make sure that the refugees will continue to stay there, secure the borders. Even despite all these measures, if refugees manage to come to modern world, to secure the borders and to keep them at the other side of borders. This is the main approach in the world. So the problem is not about theory. We have a Refugee Convention, 1951, an additional New York Protocol. We have Global Compact on Refugees. All these framework, all these documents provides the necessary framework. So the issue is about implementation of this normative framework. Unfortunately, as you rightfully touched upon,
let us, if you don't mind, Doctor, I'm just going to intercede here. Your overview is about implementation, about tackling root causes and certain steps. We will come to them in more detail, but I'd like to give everyone a chance to have their overview. So, Joanna, please, if you may.
Yes, thank you very much. So I will speak about the Lebanese perspective and my observation. Of course, my mission is rather political, but thanks to excellent cooperation with all UN agencies, and especially UNHCR, of course, we do, I hope, our best. So allow me to maybe give you some statistics. It's always useful. Actually, in Lebanon, we have exactly 840,000 registered Syrians. This is according to UNHCR, of course, record, but according to the government of Lebanon, maybe 1.5 million of Syrians are living there. You have the right to ask me what is new, because we, the refugees, suffer since now 11 years, so it's almost 12 years. What I see on the ground as more and more as a new phenomenon is especially the situation of single mothers, children, and displaced people. And I hope I will have the chance to speak also about the Lebanese socio-economic crisis due to not only the pandemic, but also some economic developments. But I can tell you that both local communities, hosting communities, and of course Syrians are in a dire situation. It's about poverty. And here again, it's always useful to see almost 80% now of Lebanese families are in need of food and a kind of assistance, and the refugees as well, Syrian refugees, but also Palestinians. So it's quite difficult, and we have the right to ask what we are doing. My distinguished predecessor mentioned a lot of frameworks. I will name again, of course, UN Global Compact, but I should tell you that there are a lot of ad hoc initiatives, and in the case of Lebanon, especially last year, thanks to mobilized efforts by UN, all agencies, resident coordinator, but of course, I would say me at the end, we mobilize additional exceptional humanitarian assistance to help the host community, to help also the refugees, because by reinforcing the host communities, we can create better situations so the refugees can benefit. I'm ready to continue, but just to start the discussion.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you. as you said, refugee flows are there to remain for many causes: war, hunger, climate change. What to do to manage with the refugees? 2 points from the experience of Italy and European Union. The first one is that on voluntary basis, it's quite difficult to reach an agreement among states, even among EU member states, in order how to manage and how to distribute the burden and how to distribute the people. A legal binding mechanism is needed, and what is going on now when we are facing the huge crisis in Ukraine, 10 million people, a quarter of the population are displaced internally or externally. In Europe, we are receiving almost 4 million people. That is a huge amount in 1 month. Well, we decided to implement the so-called Directive 55 for temporary protection. We weren't be able to do it in the past when the crisis was the Syrian one, with 6 million Syrians more or less arriving in Europe. It was not possible. Now, because of the war and because of the pressure, we decided at the EU level to implement the directive. That means that we provide to the refugee 1-year visa, health, school for children, the possibility to have a regular job. And now we have a legal binding mechanism in Europe to distribute people and to let them to live for, I hope, for a while, but at least for 1 year, with all the guarantees that we have to provide also in the past. But in the past wasn't possible, now is possible. The second point is that you have to set up some partnership with the countries of origin, first of all. We as Italians, we are just inside the Mediterranean, so we are a bridge from Africa to Northern Europe. Prohibition is not an option at the end of the day. You can't stop the flows. So our opinion is that we need a partnership with the countries of origin, and we need to set up some schemes to let the people that are going to Europe looking for a job to do it legally. We need to have a permit to come to Europe to look for a job regularly. If there is not a regular channel, someone will set up a regular, illegal and criminal one. So these are 2 points.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Finally, Dr. Salam, His Excellency, if you can...
Thank you very much, Mr. Jamal. Thanks to your distinguished guests here, because they show concern about the refugees. My people, half of the population, or 60% of the population, driven out of their homes, 6 million driven out of their countries. And thanks to everybody here showing concern about the issue of refugees, and showing not only concern but solidarity with people. The cause of these refugees, it's one aggression happening in Syria, now happening in Ukraine. If you allow me, I'll continue in Arabic, if you don't mind. Some people maybe want to hear that.
Everyone's got headphones, yeah?
Yeah. Okay. شكرا أستاذ جمال.
Thank you, Mr. Jamal. I would like to thank Dawlat Qatar for inviting us to attend this forum. The truth is that our problem is that we are looking for, we are searching and discussing the aftermath of disasters. We are discussing the aftermath of problems. What can we do to the refugees and what can we offer them? And I would like to thank all the host nations who have hosted our people. And I wouldn't distinguish between a Syrian refugee or a Ukrainian refugee, and my full sympathy with the Ukrainian, because I would say that we have suffered from Putin, not Russia. Putin invaded Syria in September 2015. And the war is still ongoing from our ruling regime and Iran. 11 years, since 11 years. However, the number of refugees have doubled after Putin's air force has interfered in the war. Of course, we shouldn't be discussing what are the reasons, but we search and we discuss the problems, why our refugees are causing problems to the host countries. 4 million are hosted in Turkey. And we are concerned about the security of such nations. The large number of refugees might cause security issues, and this needs addressing. We need to integrate our refugees in such countries, and we always advise our people to respect the local laws. The problem is that the airplanes that are bombarding Aleppo and Idlib and many other Syrian cities, even now, the same airplanes are bombarding in Syria and in Ukraine, and the same mercenaries whom Putin used in Syria is transporting them to Ukraine. So why don't we stop such atrocities and discuss hosting refugees? So please forget about hosting the issue of hosting the refugees and focus on the grassroots. The international community's position, we respect all the international community countries, but the international community, they need to work more seriously. The Syrian issue is not humanitarian, it's a political par excellence. However, when the international community couldn't find a political resolution or solution, they started exploring the humanitarian aspects. The Security Council with 15 members and 5 permanent members couldn't make any resolution. 17 resolutions are vetoed. Even humanitarian resolutions have been vetoed with regards to the Syrian humanitarian issues vetoed by Russia. So please, I implore you that we shouldn't be at the next Doha forum discussing the same issue. We should explore more issues related to development, etc. I hope that such wars would come to an end. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'm going to start with a round of questions. We have a mix of panelists here, from those who represent political or governments to those from international agencies and political forces. So it's not necessary for everyone to come in to answer on the same question, because I think there are different fields. I do want to pick up on Your Excellency, Mr. Benedetto, about one comment I wasn't quite sure. You were talking about the Directive 51 that the EU, 55 rather, sorry, that the EU is now implementing, which allows for refugees coming from Ukraine for 1 year school and health and so forth, right? And I understand obviously you are from Italy, but we're talking about the EU here. And you said that this was something that wasn't possible when Syrian refugees were coming. Why was it not possible? Why is it okay for Ukrainian refugees to be given this 1 year and not for Syrians?
Well, to be frank, it has been possible this time for political reasons, because many countries near Ukraine, on the border of Ukraine, were affected because of the sensitivity of the public opinion in Europe to the war of aggression. But I regret the fact that it wasn't possible before, because before, during Syrian refugee crisis was not possible to find the agreement among the 27 member states because the unanimity was needed to start the directive. So I regret the fact that I think that we had to do it before. Okay, it was not possible for political reason, but Italy was asking even before, not only for refugees from Syria, but also refugees from South Africa or from the eastern part, arriving through the Mediterranean Sea. But okay, now the directive is implemented and now is on the table. Is 1 year permit renewable. So it is a scheme and is a legal binding scheme for European member states, also in order to distribute the burden of the hospitality for the refugees. So unfortunately, it's because of a war, but I think that at the end of the day, it was finally the right decision.
I wanted to ask you, Anna, you were talking about the number of refugees in Lebanon. Syrian refugees are reaching up to 1.5, but it's not just Syrian refugees. There have been Palestinian refugees there for decades. And obviously, even from when the invasion of Iraq happened, there was Iraqi refugees also who came through and stuff. On the other side of it, there are those who would say an influx of refugees creates a threat to the demographic balance. Lebanon is a small country, obviously already is, beleaguered with sectarian issues. How does that impede on your work from a humanitarian perspective? Do you actually have to start calculating from the United Nations, and rather than looking at refugees as those vulnerable fleeing war, and start looking at them as numbers and what they say, number crunching and so forth, and how much does that play in terms of relief?
Thank you for these pertinent questions. In Lebanon, of course, it's a small country, but hopefully we have the presence of 26 agencies, and the UN agencies are working very well in the refugee issues. Of course, the role of UNHCR, it's extremely important, but the cooperation with others like UNICEF for children, of course, and the UNDP as well, and UNSCOL, the political mission. So what we try to do in a very transparent and respectful way, of course, to cooperate with the authorities. I should mention here the generosity of Lebanon 11 years ago, but also other countries. We have colleagues from Turkey, but Jordan at that time, how they received the refugees, to their homes. But today, due to the maybe socio-economic crisis, we have to pay attention to detention, because what we observe, it's a competition for job for everybody, both Lebanese and, of course, the people like Syrians or even Palestinians. Yes, it was 2 days ago. I visited one of the oldest camps Palestinian camp in Lebanon, Burj al-Balajna. So I try to understand the situation on the ground. Only by cooperating better and encouraging also donors, I know it's difficult because more and more conflicts are occurring now with the war in Ukraine. But still, thanks to this good cooperation, I think we can achieve now something, what I call we achieve more with less. Because we cooperate, we see who can bring the added value. Mm-hmm. The UN Compact on refugees, it's a good roadmap, but yes, we have also to be ready to tackle difficult issues like return to Syria.
Yes. Dr. Onlu, you spoke in your opening remarks about the need to look at root causes, right, of what is causing these refugees, and I think everybody also touched upon that. Turkey currently now hosts more than 4 million Syrian refugees, as well as obviously from Afghanistan and so forth. One of the root causes, or one of the main root causes, is war. Obviously, there are refugees fleeing other things. Could Turkey have prevented this by intervening militarily in Syria before the Russians had entered, could that have been a solution to preventing the root cause? And you would have had legitimacy to do so because of the fact that, you know, so many refugees were coming, would have been coming. Isn't there a duty, just as there is a duty as we're seeing, or we saw allegedly, to be involved in Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth, isn't there a duty to intervene militarily when you have a regime that is gassing and dropping chemical bombs on its people, even if it's not your people, but to prevent them from coming to you?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question, as well as a highly political one, and necessitates a quite macro response. And actually, similar remarks raised by Turkish President Erdogan during the opening remark in Antalya Diplomacy Forum. And he said that if the world could respond properly in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, we wouldn't have faced with the current situation in Ukraine. But rather than saying something Turkey's position 10 years ago, what Turkey could do, the important point is to develop international mechanism so as to prevent the occurrence of this kind of issues, rather than whether Turkey were able to do that or not. Turkey, I mean, in terms of militarily, Turkey is capable to do that, but being able to do that and doing it something different. You know?
But the truth is, there is no
international legitimacy.
there is no international mechanism. I mean, we've heard from everybody.
Exactly.
There's either an international mechanism that has vetoes, or an international mechanism that requires unanimous agreement and only comes when it suits the countries of power. So why do you wait for that?
Actually, at this stage, Turkish President Erdogan raised at every platform the necessity of establishing a safe zone and the world community. And this was one of the most important clauses of 16 March agreement signed between Turkey and EU as well. Yet EU failed to honor its commitment in the context of 18 March agreement. Yet Turkey managed to create a safe zone in Syria, in northern Syria, where almost 500 Syrians previously living in Turkey under temporary protection status left voluntarily. I mean, left Turkey for their own homeland voluntarily. I mean, we created a suitable atmosphere in northern Syria that enabled people's safe and dignified return. But if you let me a few minutes, I would like to say a few more things about the flawed nature of the world refugee system. We should touch upon, I mean, we should address the root causes of the problem, as Mr. Elmesh said. Mr. Undersecretary has touched upon the lack of anonymous decision in the EU, but the lack of, I mean, based on the excuse of lack of unanimity among EU member states, we can't, this cannot be an excuse for pushing back people at EGM. I mean, regardless of the presence or absence of such an unanimity, there is Refugee Convention, there are our commitments, we are obliged to provide protection people in need. But generally, what we witness today is the label asylum seeker as irregular migrants, so which connotates that rather than persecution and war, this is the result of some socio-economic voluntary return. So, in fact, it's not possible to assess the nature of the migration unless you assess the situation case by case. So, therefore, we cannot prevent people from accessing asylum application. We cannot violate the basic human rights. I would like to finish by saying a few last words. Very striking remarks. I would like to share with you some very striking remarks. During the last 8 years, we registered more than 500 asylum applications in Turkey. Turkey is a party to Refugee Convention based on a geographic restriction. So we only grant refugee status to those coming from Council of Europe zone. For other nationals, we provide conditional status, which means that these will be resettled through the brokerage of UNHCR to third countries. So for the last 8 years, the numbers of asylum applications we received more than 500,000, and the numbers of refugees, conditional state refugees that have been resettled to third countries through the brokerage of UNHCR is around 20,000, just 20,000. So in fact, the current system makes our reservation, our restriction meaningless. So it's not possible to go on that way. So the world refugee system is flawed. We should reassess it, revise it. So, I mean, we should address, what we need is a holistic approach, and the first step of this holistic approach should start by addressing the root causes of the problem, as Mr. El-Meshad touched upon. But we need also a holistic approach that will provide sufficient, sufficient response to all stages, all steps of refugee.
I'm gonna come to the status. I just want to ask His Excellency Salam about one thing, and then very quickly, you made a point of saying that you appreciate that friendly countries are dealing with a large number of Syrian refugees. And it echoed something that also the Undersecretary spoke about when it's often, and not just him, by the way, many politicians will describe it as the burden, even in Turkey and so forth, right? Which, as somebody who believes language means a lot, it does somewhat strip the humane elements of, it's not a burden. People aren't choosing to come to France or Germany or Italy or Turkey or whatever because they want to, they're forced to because their homes just got bombed. Why do you feel the need, or why did you feel the need to have that prerequisite, to talk about it from that perspective, particularly considering that often we hear people say the reason why they are here, let's say in Europe, is because the Europeans were there, right? That the reason why there are refugees is because often a lot of these world powers who aren't necessarily being so welcoming were the ones who were supporting either regimes in Libya, Syria, Egypt, and so forth, or fueling them or occupying those lands. So why do you feel the need to apologize for that or to thank for welcoming those refugees?
Well, we're always thankful to countries who hosted our people, but our people did not go for a visit. By, خلينا أتكلم بالعربي معلش.
They didn't go there by choice. As for your question, Mr. Jabbar, the Syrian people didn't opt for leaving their homes, and no one, if I ask this question to anyone with us here, would you choose to leave your house or home and live in a tent? However, we do appreciate the host nations, regardless of the problems, and many countries, and I know this, for Turkey, there are 7 million, 4 million of them are Syrians. I have seen the way they are treated and the way Syrians are treated in other countries. They treat them very well. And there are issues, there are problems. We don't throw the blame only on the host nations, but also we can put some blame on some of our refugees as well. However, the barrels the Iranian brought from Iran and dropped on the heads of people, an individual would be forced or cursed to leave. The problem is not with the nations deal with them. Even if some nations, even if some countries have been harsh on the Syrian refugees, they are still less harsh than the Syrian regime, the Russians or the Iranians. Yes, I understand your question. Yes, some countries have kept silent. Yes, this is our blame against the international community. The international community needs to be firm, decisive, and the United Nations and the Security Council would the Russian veto stay there forever. Now who's the enemy? To the Europeans. Who's the enemy against Syrians who pushed the refugees to leave their countries? How can such a country be permitted or allowed to be in the Security Council and use such a privilege that is limited in 5 members? This is the problem, is that the suffering of the Syrians within the Syrian is, if you would just allow me, 75% when I talk about the Syrians and the Syrians' concerns, I'm talking about the concern of all Syrians, even those who are supporting the regimes, because these are my people. I'm talking about the Syrian people in general, even the supporters of the regime. However, 75% of the Syrians who are done in the areas under the control of the regime, they are willing to leave them. They would pay $2,000, $2,500 so that they would leave the areas under the control of the regime to the liberated areas. What do you understand of this? Would our dignity accept the fact that a lady will stand 4 hours in a line to get bread for her children? I wouldn't accuse her of being supporter of the regime or as an opposition. No, these are my people. Even and therefore, we need to look at the issue considering all the Syrian people.
A little bit, because obviously, yes, the largest number of refugees come from wars, but there are other reasons, right? Especially when we're looking at climate change, when we're looking at resources and so forth. And maybe this is linked, it's not, there's one thing that was Dr. Onur mentioned, where you said, vast majority of refugees, with the exception of Ukraine, come from underdeveloped countries and so forth. The reality is also that the vast majority of refugees come from, actually, when it comes to natural resources, some of the wealthiest nations in the world, right? So whether you look at, for example, the reserves that exist in Venezuela or in Iraq or wherever you want to look, because often the wars and so forth that is happening there is because, not because these countries are poor, it's because, or underdeveloped, it's because they're overexploited. When we're looking at these, and I would like everyone to please feel free to come into this. And this is why I wanted to frame this discussion in it, because it's very easy to say these laws don't exist, the international community and so forth. But the root cause of what we're seeing, of the movement of people, is occupation, is war, is taking resources. So when we're looking now at the shift in the climate and so forth, will we start seeing more aggressive moves by more powerful countries in securing water resources or securing other things that will also further exacerbate what has been, a trajectory of more and more refugees by the millions every year? And please, we can go one by one, or whoever wants to go first.
I mean, actually, another very good question. I totally agree with the question. I mean, first of all, the refugee source countries for refugees also on many occasions, on many cases, the origin countries of irregular migration as well. So it's not always, we can not always clearly distinguish irregular migration and the issue of refugee. So because there is also a correlation between development, democracy, stability, etc. On many places where there are conflicts, wars, strifes, etc., there are also, as you said, socio-economic problems, and quite intertwined on many occasions. Therefore, the global injustice, when we say root causes, global injustice, the exploitation of the third world, I mean, a global south by global north, all these are constitutes, for sure, constitutes the root causes of the problems. And as I said, the world should address all these issues, otherwise we won't be able to and to refugee flow. We will continue to witness big influx in the future as well.
I have to try to be constructive, with all difficulties. I think we should believe in multilateralism and still deploy efforts to encourage the political solutions. So, for example, for Syria, the resolution 2254, it's extremely important if it's implemented. But again, from the point of view of UN, prevention is important. When we have a good assessment on the situation on the ground, in armed conflict situation, crisis, different social, economic, and we can predict and prevent, this will help because the migration process will be there, I am afraid, forever. So how we prepare ourselves to cope with and have still this solidarity approach to the people. I think we should more focus also on the protection of refugees, especially what I see, forgive me, this on the ground, poor children, women, very often not educated, no possibility for education. So when I speak about prevention, education should be very high on our agenda. And the second priority should be at least basic services for health, because this could be also a source of any potentially tensions.
Well, thank you. I agree that except the cases as Ukrainian one or the Syrian one, the distinction between refugees and economic migrants is not so easy in most of the cases. One factor, one push factor of migration is also demography, of course. Europe is declining, Africa is booming, and this is one of the main reasons. But when you say probably one of the root causes, among the root causes of the migrations flow is the exploitation, over-exploitation of resources from the past. That it's quite correct, of course, but coming to nowadays, I think that from a EU perspective, from the Italian perspective, the message must be clear and is partnership between the countries of origin and the countries of arrival of the people, because if we have in mind the demography, we know perfectly that if you want, I don't want to say to stop the flows, but to manage the flows, we need, first of all, development in the countries of origin. So this is why, for instance, a country like Italy implemented new programs of cooperation for development, for instance, with Africa, that is our priority nowadays. So directly to go there, to provide funds, projects for the local development. And the second point for me is to use, when I say burden share, of course, is in political terms, not in technical terms, but to use migration as a vehicle of promotion of the development in the country of origin, of course through the remittances, that is the most immediate, but also to circular migration, to provide occasions and some funds to people that come, for instance, to Europe, to study or to become technicians, and then to help them, if they want, of course, to go back with some experience, some training and some fund to start up some business in the country. Of course, everything is difficult. It's not so easy. It depends from the countries of origin, the status of the art in the country. Is it possible, easy or not easy to start up their own business? But so our idea, I agree with you when you say we need an holistic approach. Our idea is that migration can be a sort of circular and positive or not negative flow also for the countries of origin. And at the EU level, the idea is to promote this kind of policies.
Thank you. Briefly, before we open to the floor for questions, Your Excellency.
Truth be told, that the host nations, they have responded better than I would be able to answer, because we are the people with the problem. We are our people who have traveled to their countries. But I would like to take you to another area based on your question. In 2015, the moderate opposition's control was over 70% of the Syrian territories, more than 70%. After the Russians intervened in 2015, now we are controlling what we call them liberated territories or areas we are controlling approximately 12%. 12%, within this 12%, we are ready to take back 2 million refugees to these areas. However, bringing back all the refugees, this needs a step before that. What we need is a political solution. We can't bring back the refugees without a political solution. Now, when I say that we are willing and ready to receive 2 million, we need rebuilding. I'm not asking the nations to provide us funds. There are funds owned by the regime abroad, and with international supervision we can utilize such funds to develop such regions. We can provide ad hoc houses. We do want to repatriate them. However, a political solution is the thing that would bring refugees voluntary. I'm quite confident that Syrians, they love their homeland. If there is an issue, if you would allow me just very shortly, which is the forgotten issue, is the
المعتقلين لو انه خارج الموضوع اسمح لي بهذه النقطة. المعتقلين عشرات
الآلاف. The detainees, there are tens of thousands of detainees, and no one talks about them. And we started from the Geneva Declaration, and we started negotiations in 2014, 8 sessions, followed by 7 constitutional sessions. Not a single detainee was released. Is this a political process? Not a single detainee was released. Women in thousands in detention centers. Days ago, we have celebrated International Mother's Day, but there are thousands of mothers in Assad detention centers.
For refuge is the fear that they would get detained or unlawfully or enforcibly disappeared, and this obviously is also something that's not. And of course, whilst it's maybe a lot more ghastly in Syria, it's not unique to Syria. We see it in many countries. Thank you very much. I want to open the floor. We do have a bit of time for some questions. If there are any questions, please raise your hands. I can barely see because I have these lights in my eyes, so I don't know if there's a floor person or what. No, you can, there's at the back there. We have, yes.
My comment for Mr. Vidova. So if when it comes to forced displacement, so if we take off the perspective of white savior for refugees and forced displaced people, and when we adopt one perspective, which is to look for refugees and displaced people as a skilled human capitals, as workers to face labor shortage, and also as skilled workers for tech positions and other kind of work. In 2060, we will have in the world around 300 million refugees due to climate change. So, and mainly the majority of them in Western countries. So we need to prepare us from now to find complementary pathways to resettle refugees based on their skills and based on their contribution. And it's statistically proven that refugees, they contribute to the economy where they arrived, whether in neighboring countries such as Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and also in Western countries and North America. So if we change our perspective when we deal with the forced displacement, do climate change or do conflicts, we will find a way to benefit from this situation as a win-win sum. So this is just my question for you. Do you see Europe will adopt soon a new perspective to deal with refugees from Africa, from Middle East and other countries, as North America, mainly Canada? There's many private sponsorship. There's also education resettlement, and also skilled workers based resettlement. So there's like many complementary pathway and lesson learned from other countries. We can benefit from them, and also
if we can just wrap it up.
this is just like my question. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the question. If the question is, do you think that we, I mean Europe, for instance, in the medium term, we will benefit from migration flows? My short answer is yes, I agree with you. In 2016, Italy submitted to the European Union a migration compact that was a program, a project in 10 points or something like that, how to deal in a positive perspective the manage of the migration flows. I agree with you on the fact that unfortunately we will have to manage flows, migration flows, because of the climate change. At the European Union level, I can say that we are the bloc that is trying to do its own best and to go faster. Is the bloc that is going faster all over the world in order to reduce carbon emission and to get the neutrality for the half of the century. But again, my personal belief is that we will be helped by the migration flows in order to maintain the level of prosperity, because we will need more people. We are declining from a demographic point of view, and integration is a win-win game. But again, I think that we have to maintain an holistic approach. So we need to manage the flows. We need to integrate people, because we need people, more people in Europe, workers, and not only. And we have to manage to allow people that if they want to return to the countries of origin, in order to benefit from the period they are in Europe, they get more skilled, and go back to help them to start the business in their country.
Thank you very much. Can we take another question? Yeah? One more question, sorry, and then... If you can make it very quick, because I'm going to do something, they'll be upset. I'm going to add another question as well, just because otherwise...
It's very quick, I promise. My name is Gülşen Kınsekşoğlu from Turkey. I have a question for Dr. Ünlü. You mentioned about externalization. What do you mean with that one, and how does it work? When you will open up a little bit for us. Thank you.
Before you answer, let me take the other question quickly, and then we'll... just the young lady over there, please.
Hi, my name is Laila. I'm a journalist from Euronews. I have a question for His Excellency Vedova. You say that you support or you agree that refugees will sometime in future contribute to the European Union economic growth. But then what do you have to say to countries who still adopt pushback policies? Adopt and pushback policies. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Onlu, please, and then we'll go to the next.
The externalization of the migration is actually, it's quite simple, quite clear. I mean, to make sure that the refugees will continue to stay in the neighboring countries of conflict zone by providing some financial support to those countries. By actually, if it's not a little bit rude, by enticing them through, financial support. So it's a way of preventing arrival of these people to the global north. And also, I would like to take the other question as an opportunity to complement this one. When it comes to resettlement, to use the quotas for either for the most skilled part of the asylum seekers, refugees, or the most vulnerable part. But when we use it, when the global north uses it for the most vulnerable part, and promote what you are doing as much as possible. For example, 10 times higher than we do, I mean, for example, Syrian. Actually, in the case of Syrians, we never do such a thing. But there is such a paradoxical dimension in the issue. I think, so I mean, I would like to say that the global north should be aware of the fact that it's not possible to continue to this system, to, you know, to make sure that these people will continue there through providing financial support. Because financial support is not a replacement for the resettlement. It's clear. I mean, it's clearly stated many times by UNHCR as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Two reasons. One reason split it in two. The first one is a political reason. I can assure you that being a politician that tend to promote the cause of migration that help us to grow is not that easy. You need a long time to explain. And the politician that don't want migrants, need a very short time to say no, we don't need. They do not help us. First one, a political reason. Second one is that we need to set up a positive agenda with programs to have more regular flows. When you have regular flows of legal migrants also coming to seek for a job, not to seek protection, humanitarian protection, you need to manage and to have programs. So our idea is that, for instance, at the EU level, we need to set up a reasonable quota, not the one we have now, reasonable quota to let in year after year people coming, for instance, for Africa looking for a job, and to have a more regular and more managed flows. Otherwise, if you, as I said before, if you do not open legal channel, you will deal with illegal channels that is more complicated.
Thank you very much. Thank you all the speakers for your thoughts and your insights. Thank you everybody for attending. Sorry we overstepped our limits a bit in terms of time, but thanks for having us. Thank you.